employee engagement with agents, the importance of making our staff feel valued. And I'm delighted to welcome along today two brand new speakers to our webinar program. Firstly, to John Aves with the consultancy CP2 Experience. And John, you've been blogging with us now for a little while, and I know some of your articles have been very, very popular. In a sort of in a nutshell, how would you describe the sort of types of consultancy that you do?
Well, we essentially what we do is we help organizations improve their experience in ways that drive their performance as a business. And by performance, I mean not only financial performance, but also their performance in terms of the customer experience and the employee experience, because we know all three of those are linked. And we help organizations both with the strategy of that, deciding what that plan should and what that journey should look like, but also the execution through people. So we get very heavily involved in training organizations to train their own people around the new and refreshed proposition that the earlier consulting work may have thrown up. Excellent. So we very much work in the design and the implementation of a new and valuable customer experience.
Excellent. I'm also delighted to welcome Paddy Coleman from QStory to his first webinar with us. Paddy, you've got a relatively new technology company there, which specializes in intraday. I've seen it in a couple of organizations. Certainly a lot of people seem to like the holiday planning functions of the product. And you've been going for what, sort of 3 to 5 years, is that?
Thank you, John, and hello, everyone. Yes, John, we're a technology company, an intraday automation company. We've been going for, well, our product has been on the market for about 3 years now, and that product sits alongside existing planning systems, existing WFM systems, and automates the changes that need to take place during the day, and that's very powerful. And one of the side benefits of doing that is that it enables a lot of flexibility, and it frees up a lot of time for agents. And that's why I'm here this morning, to talk about how what we do can contribute to an environment suitable for a high degree of agent engagement.
Indeed. Well, thank you for that. Just a bit of housekeeping. If you want, there will be a replay of today's webinar available. That'll be available from about 3:30 this afternoon. callcenterhelp.com/recorded webinars. If you would like to get a copy of the slides today, the place to do that is to log into our chat room, which has already been very active already, and that's at callcenterhelp.com/chat. It is in a different window, so you just need to put in your first name, last name, and email, and then you'll have two windows open. So what a lot of people like to do on fairly big screens these days, have the chat room in one side, the webinar screen in the other. And once you're logged in, you'll see this little link here saying download webinar slides. Click on that and you'll be able to get hold of both John and Paddy's presentations. There's an added advantage of being in the chat room as well. You can ask questions of our speakers, but also of the audience. And we've also got a rather nice bottle of champagne here to be won. So if you've got a tip on employee engagement, just use #tip, and we'll be drawing that at the end of today. If you prefer a box of chocolates or an Amazon gift card, we can certainly arrange that for you. And we're going to start off with a poll. What I'd like to do is to say, what are the most important factors for employee engagement? And perhaps pick two of these factors in terms of what you think is most important for employee engagement. Is it work-life balance? Is it self-development or career progression? Is it fairness and transparency? Is it a good salary? Or is it a good atmosphere to work in? So if you'd just like to pick, say, what you think are the two most important topics in there. John, salary is often talked about as a, pay and as a motivator. Do you think that's really the, a key factor with employee engagement?
A lot of the research on this subject shows that the most powerful factors affecting engagement and connection are the things that are inside us, are kind of indigenous, and mostly those factors connect to emotional needs that we have. And salary is not one of those, but certainly salary is really important if it's outside of a kind of zone of tolerance, a zone of acceptability to people. So if people feel they're being really hard done by because the organization is abusing them or not being fair with them, then it's certainly a factor. And usually people, what happens is that people vote with their feet. If they feel they're being taken advantage of, and however they may discuss that with their manager or voice their concerns, nothing is done, then people vote with their feet and usually take their time elsewhere. Leave the organization.
We've got the voting back. It's an each way first choice between 51% say work-life balance and 51% say self-development or career progression. In second place, with a very high number, a good atmosphere at work is certainly one of the keys. Fairness and transparency. Paddy, you're going to be talking on that. And actually, good salary becomes much less. So I think that, John, that very much ties in with what you were saying there about you need to get a basic level right, but actually that's not really the big thing that engages with people. So probably quite a good time now, John, to pass the baton across to you. And if you'd like to share with us some of your thoughts on how we can improve employee engagement in the organisations that we work with.
Indeed. I've got a lot of stuff on my screen here, Paddy, and I can't see my slides.
Okay, let's just see if we can change back here, and I'll change across to you there, John. Can you see that on your screen?
No, I've still got all the pictures of you. So can I minimise that?
Failing that.
Alt tab.
What we'll do, Joe, can you put the slides up on the screen there, and we can get John to talk through those? There we go. So, John, we've got those up on the screen currently. We need to go just full screen on that one, Joe. Press F5. John, while we're doing that, do you want to just take it through us? There we are.
Indeed. Are they full screen for you now?
We are indeed.
And can I navigate them, or will
no, you just need to say next slide when you'd like to move on.
Okay, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Sorry about that technical hitch. My name's John Aves, and for those of you who have just joined, I'm delighted to join you for this afternoon's webinar. A little bit of background on me. I've worked in the customer experience space pretty much all of my career. Initially as a line manager with British Airways, during the period when BA really was the world's favourite airline, as we used to claim in our ads at the time. But more recently, as a consultant and advisor to a range of companies, to helping them improve the customer experience. As I said, if you caught this earlier on, I truly believe that every successful customer experience initiative kind of has to start with the employees, and particularly those at the front line, which is really why I was so keen to join the call today. So let's move on, and next slide, and take a look at our agenda. I'd like, in the next 15 minutes or so, I'd like to address 3 themes with you. The first is, why is customer experience a challenge for the contact center? Secondly, why should we focus on employee engagement? And thirdly, I'm going to leave you with 5 tips that I hope you will find useful in engaging your frontline agents in order to deliver a better customer experience. So let me start with the first of those. Why is customer experience for the contact center? And if we move to the next slide, I've listed here a number of the daily challenges that you guys face. And you don't need me to go through them. You are very familiar with them, I'm sure. But let me make two comments. The first is that customers' expectations are rising, and increasingly consumers are becoming much less brand loyal, which means that what we have to do is we have to really raise the bar in order to earn their trust and their loyalty. The second is that because customers can solve so many problems, so many routines problems these days online, when they do call into a contact center, it tends to be because they need help with a more complex inquiry or because something's gone badly wrong. And this is why the quality of our agents and the experience they deliver is so important, because in these moments of truth, when they call us in a contact center, we really have the opportunity through our agents to create an impression on customers that either adds value to your brand or undermines it and destroys it. So these are really important moments, given the importance in the consumer's mind of the reasons why they phone the contact center. So the importance of our agents is borne out in the next slide by the research from the Institute of Customer Services. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the ongoing research that the ICS in the UK conducts, but they conduct an annual survey, major survey, thousands of customer data points, multiple companies across a whole range of industries. And what they report in their January 2018 report, State of Customer Satisfaction in the UK, is that they identify complaint handling, over the phone experiences, openness, trust, and transparency as the key factors that differentiate some of the best performing organizations that they looked at from the rest. So if you just think about those factors for a moment, you'll see how clearly they relate to the work of a contact center. If you go to the next slide and look at specifically the data on complaint handling, you'll see the factors there that separate the top performing from the other organizations. So it's pretty clear there that all of these factors on this slide and the previous slide really are in the hands of the agents in our contact centers. And again, that's where they have the opportunity to really make a difference for really for the perception of our brand as we're dealing with customers. So if we move on to the next slide, there's one other thing that I thought was worthwhile commenting on here in the spirit of the challenges we face in the contact center, and that comes back to the purpose of what the contact center is there for. Now, if your goal is to drive customer advocacy and customer loyalty, which is depicted in the right-hand side of this table here, as opposed to provide customer support at the lowest possible cost, which is under the transactional column, then the approaches for those two purposes, if you will, are very different. And I've certainly talked to people in the past who've had to contend with a message from their organization that says our contact center is here to improve the experience for customers, and yet they've not been given the resource support or the help, and they've been driven by efficiency and activity metrics, which are typically characteristic of the transactional column that you see there. So these are some of the challenges we face in the contact center. So what I'd like to do is move on to look at why we should focus on employee engagement. And if we move to the next slide, the answer is very clear. And this graphic, which is well founded by a lot of research on the subject, is kind of pretty intuitive, really, which is employees who are engaged tend to be much more motivated and more committed than those who are not. What happens when people are motivated and committed is they go the extra mile and they stay with the organization, and that drives high performance and high retention and reduces agent turnover. So, as I say, pretty intuitive really, that sequence of events, and as I say, well founded on a lot of research. If we move to the next slide, you see a couple of bits of recent research from Mori and IBM. And if you click through to the quotes there, Joe, the next one as well, the quotes from Maury and IBM reinforce what we've been saying, which is, employee behavior has a significant impact on customer loyalty, which itself is the driver of financial success. So let me move on to pause there for a second and move on to 5 tips I'd like to share with you that I hope will be useful for you in your efforts to engage your agents, your employees, for a better customer experience. And before I look specifically at the 5 tips that I've got, what I'd like to do is, in the graphic that we looked at 2 slides back, we looked at the question of motivation and its impact on performance. And I'd like to just say a word or 2 about the issue of motivation. So if we can go to the next slide. What we know, and this is courtesy of a recent book by Lindsay McGregor and Neil Doshi, what we know is that there are 3 key factors that drive individual motivation. The first is purpose. By purpose, we mean that my work and the aims of the organization matter to me. The second is potential. By potential, the authors meant that I get something out of doing the work. There is a contract here that's of value to me. There's a reason why I put my shoulders to the wheel. And the payback for me could be personal, it could be developmental, it might be to do with personal satisfaction, reward, financial reward, it might be to do with recognition. Potential can come in lots of different forms. The third is play. And by play, the authors meant I get the opportunity to contribute, to express my view, to experiment, and be creative, and have a little bit of fun along the way. So what they found was these 3 factors were very instrumental in causing high levels of motivation and high level of performance in frontline employees. If we go to the next slide, they also found that there are a number of factors that worsen motivation and reduce the effectiveness of performance. And the 3 factors, the factors here rather, were to do with economic pressure, which is emotional pressure, which at its worst is about shaming people because they've not performed as well as the guy next to you. And that leads to a sense of insecurity and guilt. And economic pressure, which is you've got to hit the targets, you've got to hit the numbers, you've got to hit the call time metrics we set you. That leads to, at its worst, in mercenary behavior. And what the authors talked about here was that in an operating environment where emotional pressure or economic pressure is at its most, what you find is that causes motivation and performance to worsen because there's no space, there's no airtime for purpose, potential, and play that we talked about in the previous slide. So, with that in mind, what I'd like to do is move on to the next slide, and I would like you to think about if those things that we've just talked about there are really important, then it's up to us as managers and leaders to create an environment where people are motivated, where they can be at their best, and where purpose, potential, and play can rise to the top, and where some of those other pressures that worsen performance can take back seat. So tip number 1. See, we've got a formatting issue here, but nonetheless, let's steam on. Tip number 1 is all about hiring the right people. And you will hear the expression, hire for attitude and values and train for skills. Now, this is exactly what first directed in the UK 25 years ago and still does today. And those of you in the US, and I saw there were some on the US in the call, will know Zappos, which is the online shoe retailer, which recruits people who share their values, and which includes delivering the values of their business, include delivering wow experiences to customers, pursuing growth and learning, and having fun. And Zappos is so protective about its culture that apparently they offer new hires $2,000 at the end of week 1 of training to leave the organization. And that's a test to see whether those individuals are really passionate and committed to the values of Zappos. And if they don't take the $2,000, then they stay, and they're the kind of people they would like to see in the organization. In that vein, actually, I'd like to recommend you Google a speech given by a guy called Herb Kelleher, who's the founder of Southwest Airlines, and he talks about how they went about building Southwest culture, and he talks about the fact they recruit people, warrior spirit, a servant's heart, and have a fun-loving attitude. You should listen to it, Google his speech and listen to his speech. It's really remarkable, and they certainly hire for attitude and train for skills. If we move on to the next slide, Innocent, the drinks company, has learned that lesson as well. Culture is really vital to their brand, and they are very, very tough with people who, once they join the organization, are really not on the same page as them. And they say you have to make decisions very quickly, because if you leave people who are not a good fit for the organization, what they do is they pollute the culture, and then the culture becomes undermined. So they follow the same instinct as well. So it all starts with hiring the right people and retaining the culture that you want to prevail in the organization. So tip number 2, next slide, is all about creating a sense of purpose around the customer. And I love these 2 quotes from the mid-70s. Steve Jobs, his vision was that everybody in the world will have a computer. And the guy who headed up DEC at the time saw there was no reason why people would need a computer in their home. And I'll leave you to decide which cause or purpose will be the most motivating for you. This issue of a motivating purpose, if you go to the next slide, Amazon have a mission or a vision to be the Earth's most customer-centric company. And they've done a lot of things that you would expect a company that is committed to becoming the most customer-centric company to do. They decided when they started out to stock 1 million books in their online bookstore, which was, you know, many times more than anybody else would typically have at a bookstore. And they also took the decision to list competitors' products, suppliers rather, and the products that they would sell, even if they were selling them cheaper than Amazon did. And if your mission is to create trust with your customer base so that you become the go-to site, you can understand why Jeff Bezos would do this, even though it received some protestation from with people within his own organization when he made these decisions. The last example to do with creating a sense of purpose is O2 in the UK. And some years ago, O2 was looking to really differentiate itself from the competition. Next slide. Hello, Joe. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can still hear you, John. No problem still.
Okay. If you go back one slide, Joe. Some years ago, O2 was looking to really differentiate itself in the marketplace, and competitors were competing on the basis of handsets and price plans, easy to copy and very short term in terms of competitive advantage. And the result for O2 at the time was that cost of acquisition customers was going up, margins were declining, and they had 40% customer churn, as did everybody else every year. And the result was that customers were increasingly lured away by the latest short-term offer. And they stumbled upon this quote in their research, which was, a customer said, "I would rather lose my wallet and my keys than my phone." And they thought about this for a while and realized that the phone was much more than a handset and a price plan. It was something that really helped people connect to the people and the things that matter to them in their lives. And if you see yourself in that way, as opposed to a supplier of a handset and a price plan, if you see yourself as connecting customers to the people and the things that matter in their life, you do things very differently. And O2 did things differently as a result of seeing this. And on the next slide, what you see is they started to think about how you can keep customers loyal. And the way you keep customers loyal is reward their loyalty and recognize the things that matter to them in their lives. And they created a priority structure whereby people had access to music events and sporting events at the O2 venue, which you see on the next slide here, they had access to those things in preferential terms if they were priority members of O2. And that led to a different kind of relationship with their customers, and they created loyalty that went beyond the product or the service. And as a result of this, at that time, O2 became the market leader. So that's tip number 3, because I think I've got 2 minutes left according to my allocated time. Tip number 3 is about focusing on learning and systematically managing the learning process. You know, if we go back to McGregor and Doshi, who wrote the book that I referred to earlier, in the empirical studies they conducted, one of the things that they did was they dialed up the focus on learning and dialed down the emotional and economic pressure that we talked about. They tightly managed the learning in these experiments they ran, and they really created a culture of learning built around coaching by managers and other team members who were highly skilled. And they did things like have individuals rate their skill and use that discussion of their perceived strengths and weaknesses in regular discussions with their managers in order to shape the individual learning plans that were relevant for those people as individuals. And the result was that performance problems, when they occurred, weren't met with blame and defensiveness. They were met by a culture of learning and teaching, because they saw that as the key to improving performance. And so when you think about performance, what they were focusing on were the 3 things you see on this slide. They were engaging people at 3 levels, because they realized improving performance need to recognize there are things people need to learn, they just need to know. There are things that motivate people, and there are new skills they needed to learn and new tools that they needed to change and enhance their behavior. So they very much created plans for people in terms of these three areas of learning. And if you move to the next slide, O2 saw that they really needed to create fans of their employees if they were going to create fans of their customers. And the last thing I'll say about this focus on intentional learning is shown by the next slide. One of the things that O2 did was create a people promise, and these are, I'm not going to go through it, but you can see these are the elements of the people promise. They publicize this to employees, and in their employee survey every year, they ask employees to rate whether the organization was creating a warm welcome for them when they joined, asking whether this was a great place to work, whether they were trusted to do a great job, whether managers managed with a human touch. They asked employees those questions, and managers were measured by the extent to which they delivered this people promise to their employees. So when I say about tightly managing the learning process, this is the way in which O2 managed to do that. The 4th tip I'm going to go to, and I'm going to slip across this one fairly quickly, and what this is really about, again in back to the book by McGregor and Doshi, what this is about is linking to both the play and the purpose and the potential things they talked about, was really to encourage team-based learning. And you'll see the things there that I've seen in organizations that really drive engagement. Having people work in teams, having them identify things that they see wrong, and having them take some responsibility for creating those improvements, and making sure our job as managers is to make sure that those efforts are supported and joined up. Because if they're not, then all that you find is that you get 2 different groups in different parts of the company working on the same thing, and they're not given support to really make a difference that they can. So we have a big job of work to do as managers to make this happen effectively. And I want to move very quickly to the last tip in my last few remaining seconds here. And in a sense, the last tip is the most important, because it's the role that leadership plays. I have to mention my own boss, Colin Marshall at British Airways, in the days when I was at BA. As leaders, we can't force people to perform, because we can't sit and watch them 24/7. They have to want to perform, and our job is to inspire them as leaders. And what people do is they pay much more attention to what leaders and managers do than what they say. And I can tell you from my experience at British Airways that Colin Marshall was an inspirational leader. He was around the organization, he was doing things, he was paying attention to what people told him, he was making a difference. And if you look at the checklist on the very last slide I have here, I want you as managers and leaders to think to yourself and ask yourself, how do you spend your time? Do you spend your time talking about company vision and purpose? Do you spend your time with employees and customers? Do you focus on what they talk to you about and demonstrate you've heard them by getting back to them and making changes accordingly? You know, do you listen, coach, and encourage? You know, if you're spending your time doing these things, you're creating the kind of environment that drives performance in the positive way we've been talking about, as opposed to driving the you know, emotional stuff and the hardline numbers that traditionally has been the way that many contact centers have driven themselves. And I'm interested to see that you talked about a lot of those things, work-life balance, self-development, and good atmosphere in the poll as really driving performance in your views. So rush at the last few minutes there, but that's all from me. I'm going to hand back. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, John. I think a very comprehensive presentation there. Some great learning experiences. Certainly, I loved the bit about purpose, potential, and play. Purpose being things such as my work matters. Play being creative, having fun. I think that's a very key thing. A systematic focus on learning is a core part of the organisation. I think is very good. And yeah, I've always loved that phrase, hire for attitude, train for skills. So some great things there. We're going to jump across to the chat room now, and we're going to have a look at some of the questions that have been coming through in the and the tips have been coming through. Shona's sent in a tip, said, I did a research project on engaging managers and carried out focus group sessions. And the strongest response was a manager who knows me as a person, who knows what matters most to me. And I guess that ties in very much with your John, with your comment about Colin Marshall.
Yeah, that one of those effective leadership behaviours was be honest, genuine, and authentic, and interested in what matters to me. And when you show an interest in what people talk to you about, they tend to tell you more about it, and you learn more, and can be more effective as a manager and a leader because you may know more at that point about the root cause of the problem and so on. So I think that's spot on with that tip.
Yeah, and there's a good technique I often do in a contact centre, particularly on a Monday, is go and ask the team managers towards the end of the day what their team did on the weekend. And you can really get an idea of which team managers are connected with their team and which ones aren't, and that has a really key part in it. Here's an interesting one. Question from Hannah says, "What's the best way to motivate employers when they're stressed and unhappy and frustrated with the system or something they have no control over?" Paddy, I don't know if you've got any answers for this one. I think we've got Paddy on mute there. Let's just bring Paddy's microphone on there. So what happens when the system's not working?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know.
Okay,
I don't know how you cope with that frustration.
Well, one of the ones that, I mean, you really have to go off, I think, and fix some of these systems. One of the things that a dear old friend of mine, Paul Cooper, wrote an article on Call Centre Help a little while ago called "Slow Computer Systems, It's Not Rocket Science." We tend to roll our eyes when the IT department say it's running, or when the system runs slow. We don't go and make enough fuss of the IT department that this is not acceptable behaviour. If we were running slow in our jobs and not delivering, we'd soon find out about it. And I think we need to hold that accountability on IT systems. These days and age, there's enough hardware you can throw at these problems and enough software as well. So here's another tip in.
Monty.
Yes.
Monty, I think the other thing on that is that the argument you've just put there is absolutely the reason why all departments within the organization, even if they're not immediately customer facing, really need to be connected to the voice of the customer. Because if the IT guys understand what happens at the front line, they'll be more inclined to help and less inclined to develop the kind of systems that are not fit for purpose.
Yeah. Well, here's a really wacky tip from David. Get your employees fully participating in driving improvements. My team weren't hitting the quality target set. And I challenge, what can I do to ensure that you're fully on all aspects of the call? Their answer, make us one of your cheesecakes. The last 2 months we've smashed the target and I've let them choose the flavour I make when we have a team lunch buffet. So that's certainly an unusual approach, but I guess is showing a connection with, making a connection with the team. Scott has posed a question, what's the best way of proving how someone is polluting the culture, both of them and the human resources? This is an interesting one. John, any thoughts on that?
Well, I think there's two things. There's a full way. The employee surveys that we've talked about many times are the kind of things that will give you, statistical data on whether people enjoy working there and whether they feel motivated, whether they think there's a good atmosphere, or whatever the employee survey questions that are asked. And usually, most organizations, you can dial those down to the individual department. So if there is some pollution happening, you're going to see it in those results. But more immediately, because that survey may be a year away, more immediately, you just need to look at what people are talking about and what they're saying and the impact that what people are saying is having on them. You see it by observing people. So, as we saw in the example of Innocent I gave, they think it's not okay when people are polluting the culture and they have to call people out on that. And I think that if people are doing that, then they need to be called out.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with you on that. We've had a tip in from Hannah who says, to encourage employee engagement, as management, it's important to remember that management is about arranging and telling, but leadership is about nurturing and enhancing. And it's important to balance the two parts. I think that's certainly very key. Right, we've got time for a quick poll, and that is, what barriers are stopping you from employee engagement? So if you perhaps pick up to 3, what barriers are stopping you from employee engagement? Is it things like shift patterns, schedules, or arranging time off for people? Is that having a big impact on people? Is it contact volumes or workload that's causing a lot of problem? Is it things like budget? You haven't got enough budget to perform? Is it pressure to perform or the targets that you have? Or is it maybe the coaching skills of your managers? So if you'd just like to vote on that, certainly I've seen lots of problems with getting people time off and getting them the shift patterns they need on there. So if you'd just like to vote on that. And I think we've got most of the votes in now. I'm just going to close the results and share those. So it looks like the biggest problem that's causing employee engagement currently is contact volumes and workload. Just too many calls, I guess, too many emails, too many live chats coming in and having to deal with them. And then followed reasonably closely with the pressure to perform. And then in sort of very similar numbers, we have shift schedules and time off requests, budget and coaching skills of managers. So quite a range of different approaches in terms of that. I think it's probably a good time now to pass the baton across to Paddy Coleman. And Paddy, I know you've got some feelings about the way that technology can also help with the employee engagement. If we can put your presentation up there, would you be able to share that with us? Brilliant.
Hopefully you can see that first slide.
We can indeed.
Thank you. Today I dressed to match the photo as closely as possible, for what that's worth. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Paddy Coleman, and I'm the founder of QStory, the intraday automation company. Engaged colleagues go about their business with vigor. and dedication and absorption. They don't do stuff because they have to or because the boss is watching, but because it's right and it's useful either for the customer or for the company. Sometimes they even lose track of what they're doing because they're so absorbed in their mission. Now, I'm sure everyone on this call remembers times in their lives when they behave that way. And I'm sure you can even name people in your organization like that today. But these three simple traits are a very useful way to, just as you walk around, to gauge, you know, the daily health and the daily engagement of your organization. Now, I do have a graphic here, what makes an employee highly engaged. I'm not going to address this because I don't have enough time, but it is available for those of you who download these slides. Okay. Having built efficient operations, companies are realizing that more needs to be done to improve the environment. That's great news for colleagues. It's also great news for companies if they get it right. Engaged staff have reduced absenteeism and churn while delivering better service and higher output, higher productivity. So not only does a good environment create a much better level of engagement, which results in a much happier time at work, but actually there's a strong business case for any company that takes this seriously and wants to go about doing it. So creating an environment where colleagues are fully engaged isn't something that's going to be done with a magic bullet. As John said, I think very clearly, it starts with hiring the right people. As it happens, if you have a good reputation for your company and it is an engaged environment, that will support your hiring of the right people. But don't think that anyone can walk into a place that's in a mess and by pressing a few buttons, suddenly everyone is engaged and identifying with the company's mission. So creating, enabling engagement requires creating a dynamic, responsive environment where people have a purpose, as John said, the potential to develop, both professionally and personally, and space to play, but without too much economic or emotional pressure. And that's certainly been backed up by the few very simple surveys we've just performed, where workload and pressure topped the poll for things working against employee engagement, and flexibility and transparency were close to the top of the polls for things that people look for in an engaged environment. Now, here at Q-Story, we focus on the technical side of things. We're not the guys to phone up and ask about reward or the softer side of the business. But part of our purpose, and the reason my staff and I are very engaged in what we do, is because we believe technology can make a very important contribution to creating a dynamic, responsive environment that enables more flexibility, transparency, and learning while reducing pressure and inertia. When we started looking at the employee engagement problem, for want of a better word, we started looking at an area where we have a definite impact, and that's flexibility. We also considered transparency. When I hear people say they'd like to see more transparency, what I'm really hearing is they'd like to trust people more. They'd like to be sure that there's more fairness. Nothing erodes morale and engagement more quickly than feeling the game is rigged. And very often that happens as an unintended consequence of other decisions. but it's very real, and it's something to be very aware of. So in considering inflexibility, one of the big challenges for having an engaged staff, and if you like, one of the key things that one can do to enable a better work-life balance. I just wanted to talk about what makes contact centers inflexible. So one of the first things is just difficulty. It takes a lot of time and effort to forecast customer behavior and to create schedules to deliver quite complex plans in order to serve customers quickly and efficiently. So changing those plans is a challenge. Secondly, workload. If there's one or two of you in the office and you say, look, I think I'll go home early today because we're not too busy, that's easy to say yes, no. But when there are hundreds and even thousands of people in an organization and everyone has normal life happening and they want to send in requests to either real time or the planning department, that creates a massive workload. I know of departments where they have 3 or 4 FTEs working flat out, just managing the change requests that come in from agents and team leaders during the day. And of course, it's worth remembering that no one ever gets rewarded for risking the customer experience. The number one reason the contact center is there is to answer the phone, is to serve the customer. So putting that at risk isn't going to get anyone any recognition anytime soon. In terms of transparency, well, we all know the feeling when we don't get the shifts we'd like, we don't get the holidays we'd like, we don't get the overtime at a time of the year when we'd like to get it. Basically, you start to think, how is this decided? Can I be sure that my team leader hasn't got it in for me, or that some manager isn't looking after someone else? I mean, these are normal emotions. They might not make sense. They might be totally dislocated from what's actually happening, but we have to go out of our way to make sure that it's very difficult for someone to get convinced that the game is rigged. Now, automation enables fairness and flexibility. Machine-based processing of requests removes a lot of restrictions, increases speed, and very importantly, removes any real or perceived bias in the process. Excuse me, just language letting me down there a little bit. By automating certain decisions and actions, the foundation can be put in place for a more engaged environment. So I want to be clear here. I'm in no way saying that, oh, get some technology in and suddenly the world will change and everyone will be engaged. But what I am saying is there are certain problems that are at the root cause of inflexibility and transparency. Two big issues, two big hurdles that need to be cleared when engaging in workflows. And there is a technical solution to those specific problems. And with that technical solution in place, an environment can become a lot more agile, a lot more responsive to staff needs, and a lot more enabling of training, skills training, but also self-development and apprenticeships, and a lot fairer in how results are allocated. So how does this work? So here in the top right corner, we have the WFM system. Every contact center has a WFM system. It's the foundation for who turns up when, doing what. And it's also the hurdle, it's also the big hurdle for making changes to who turns up when, doing what. It takes a lot of effort to manually update WFM systems, to manually check what the impact is going to be if a team goes off the phones for half an hour communication session, and so on. What we've built is something that you can consider a central balancer. So it's a piece of technology that sits right next to the WFM system. It loads up schedules and forecasts in advance of contact day, and then it continuously checks the balance as information comes in, such as absenteeism, lates, and as information on actual workloads come into the contact center. The central balancer is continuously checking what's the state, how are my overs and unders? Do I have surplus staff? Do I have a deficit? Now, once that foundational piece of technology is in place, suddenly a whole load of stuff can happen that isn't possible when you're processing manually. And one of the big things that can happen is the introduction of a new colleague interface. So the colleague interface basically can be an app on a phone. It can be a web page on a desktop in the call center. And it allows colleagues to interact.
Not sure if we've lost Paddy there. Paddy, can you hear us? John, I'm not sure if you can hear Paddy.
No, can't hear him at all. It's frozen.
Okay, well, we'll come back to... Oh, we may have him back there. Paddy, can you hear us?
Your call center know that you're actually keen and available to have overtime at certain times of the year or certain days of the week, and also what times you're not available, and times that you'd actually be quite happy to go home early, and so on. Be more responsive to your needs. Automatic time banks, you know, when you work time overtime or you work a few more minutes at the end of a shift, wouldn't it be great if that was automatically gathered up in the time bank, and then when you came late the next time, the time bank could say, well, look, here's the thing, you helped us out before, now we're going to offset that by this lateness. Or you could use banked time to go home early or to change your break. Automatic holiday approval is something that is key to a lot of people. I mean, I certainly want to be able to get my holiday plans approved quickly, efficiently, and without bias, absolutely without bias. I want to know that I'm much happier that a machine says, yeah, you've got the time, we can let you go, you're clear to book your holiday, and it takes 30 seconds rather than a couple of days. And I can do it at any time rather than having to give weeks or months notice. I mean, on a quiet day in a month, and maybe it's a Friday, and I decide, you know, I could really go out and spend time with the kids. Why don't I book a half day's leave right now? Wouldn't that be great? Well, that's possible. The only thing in the way are regulations that themselves are driven by how slow and how difficult it is to do calculations and to approve things quickly. Some of the features that customers are getting very excited about is the ability for their staff to exchange breaks with each other, to match their breaks to each other. So you're walking down a corridor and your buddy says, oh, I'm on break at 12, why don't we have a coffee? You can go into the app, see that your break is at 11:30, move it to 12, and within a few minutes, the central balancer will say, sorry, we can't let you do that because we're really, really tight. Or it'll say, no problem, your break is now at 12 instead of 11:30. But it's based upon the team's requirements. Exchanging shifts, of course, is always good. And sliding shifts. If the customers aren't going to be hurt by you moving your shift out a half an hour, or even bringing it forward a half an hour to start your day, or an hour, then what's the problem? Why don't you just do that? Well, with the right technology foundation in place, you can do that and much more. There are new features that are now possible coming online all the time. And that's really the point I want to make with this slide.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for that, Paddy. We're going to jump across to the chat room now and have a look at some of the top tips and questions that have been coming through from the audience. Been lots and lots of tips in there, so we'll take a few out. Claire says, remember that it's always good to focus on your employees' well-being and putting things in place that can help, having them understand what they are and where they can go if they need it. I certainly like that. Interesting one here. Jess said, run get, set, go sessions at the start of each day, 10 to 15 minutes long. These activities may include quizzes, team building games, or educational activities to help focus each advisor's minds before they start to handle customer contacts. John, what do you think of a sort of ready, set, go at the start of each shift?
I think it's a great idea. It's a way of, creating cross the team communication to the supervisor or manager, manager's communication back, and it gives the opportunity for kind of reinforcing what it is we're trying to do and what it is we're here for. You see this kind of process adopted not only in contact centers but also in retail stores as well, where they have the huddle for 15 minutes before the store opens. So I think it's a great idea.
Indeed, interesting comment from Laura, which I guess ties in very much with our poll here. And Paddy, I don't know if you've got any views on this one, but how can you have employee engagement when you've got limited offline time available to sort of call workload? Is there a technological angle you can schedule time for engagement?
So one of the very big benefits delivered by intraday automation is much better ability to identify available time for all sorts of activities. It's a fact of all schedules that they don't match customer demand perfectly. And it varies obviously from operation to operation, but there's actually a lot of time available in most schedules for a lot of activities that currently aren't being done. And this kind of central balancer, if you like, is great at finding that time and suggesting uses for it.
Yeah, certainly when it's all hands to the pump, that's the time when you actually have to make most time for other activities. Sure. Some interesting tips in. Scott says we use lots of methods to engage our staff. We have an employee engagement committee, a social committee, and an employee representative team created by employees for employees. I think that's very nice. Amelia says measure an employee net promoter score to check engagement over time and measure the impact of what you do to influence engagement. It wouldn't necessarily have to be an employee net promoter score, it could be just an employee satisfaction score. Hannah says engagement doesn't need to cost anything. Arrange an evening out where everyone meets up and has a meal or a drink. Everyone pays for themselves, but it will show that you're trying to bring everyone together at an uncertain time. Certainly, I mean, one of the biggest motivators is actually simply the word thank you. Thank you for doing a good job. I think that's quite a key one. And Antonica says, happy, motivated employers work hard for you. When you show that you care about their personal development beyond the job, they know you care about them and they work even harder. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time that we've got time for today. So if in the chat room, in one or two words, you could say, what did you like best about today's webinar? We've picked a winning tip today, and that comes from Shona. And Shona says, have employee consultative forums to listen to agents and take action on as many of their suggestions as feasibly possible. And if you can't explain why not, that's actually half the battle. Quarterly forums are good as they allow enough time to take actions between meetings. John, certainly I like that suggestion. We've got a survey to complete at the end of today's webinar if you'd like to fill that in as you leave. And if you'd like a demonstration of how the Q-Story software can improve employee engagement, or indeed holiday planning or intraday management, I'm sure Paddy would be only happy to arrange that for you, and that's also in the survey. We're back next week where we're looking at customer journey mapping, and just like to say thank you very much to our two speakers. John, thank you for joining us for your first webinar with us.
Thank you very much. Enjoyed it.
Indeed. And Paddy, thank you for joining us as well today for also your first webinar.
Thank you, John T.
And thank you very much, and we'll catch everyone next week. Thanks then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.